Beautiful. Good afternoon, everyone. We're just waiting for people to kind of all gather together. Thank you so much for being here with us again today for our, Susan, I was looking through the old flyers, and I believe this is our 26th or 25th courageous conversation since the pandemic. So it's kind of crazy how time flies, but at the same time, it's kind of cool looking back at all the conversations that we've had. So we're really excited to have this one. So maybe, what do you think, Susan? Wait a minute or two, or should we go ahead and?
I think we can go ahead and start. It's 3:06.
3:06. Okay, great. So hello again. My name is Milia Islam Majid, and I serve as the Executive Director of the South Coast Interfaith Council. And this series that we have, the Courageous Conversations, it's a monthly program that we really started at the onset of the pandemic, now almost 2 years ago, just to kind of address the issues that people are facing as we kind of entered into this new realm of the coronavirus and all that came with it. However, it has continued, and to this program where we really like to take an opportunity to talk about things that are very important and necessarily we don't always talk about. And so last week, Susan led the conversation on being Black and Muslim, and we wanted to kind of continue that. And so today, our topic will be being Jewish, being Black and Jewish, a conversation around race and identity and culture in America. What does that mean? And so without further ado, I'd like to actually introduce Susan to everyone. Susan Brooks, she is my president of the Interfaith Council this year from Temple Bethel. So Susan, thank you. And I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Milia. Yeah, as Milia said, I am a member of Temple Bethel in San Pedro. It's a small Reformed congregation where I've been with my family for about 18, 19 years. And last month, our conversation was really relevant because I'm an alumni of the new Jewish Partnership for Change. So I've gone through their professional fellowship and went through this year, because of the pandemic and not being able to gather in person, we did an accelerator program that focused on race and really rooting out anti-Blackness in both of our religious groups. My husband happens to be Black, and so I have 2 mixed race children that I've raised Jewish. So I have some adjacent experience in this, but our 2 speakers today, I'm so thrilled to have them. They're both amazing people. I have the privilege of having met both of them in the past. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction because both of them have these resumes that could go on for days. Marissa Gee is an educator at Santa Monica College and runs her own wellness company called Corporate Active. She's a personal trainer and running coach. Marissa is a former board member of the Jewish Multiracial Network and volunteered in Uganda as part of a program with American Jewish World Services. Her work in the area of social justice is found pairing with her Judaism as a member of ICAR, a synagogue founded on the Jewish principle of social justice. Marissa is married and has 2 children. And so I will also preface this. My children are grown now, but some of our 2 storytellers, Amelia, have little kids. So if you see a head popping in the background, it's just life during the pandemic. Joshua Silverstein is an award-winning actor, comic writer, beatboxer, and educator. He drops beats on the regular with the Late Late Show with James Corden in the series Drop the Mic. His solo show premiered on stage in 2014. As an educator, Joshua's facilitated countless theater, improv, and spoken word workshops. He's a co-host and co-producer of the Emmy Award-winning Downbeat 720, a high school open mic. Joshua is married and he also has 2 children. I'm going to start this program off. I'm going to share a piece from this year's Storyteller Spotlight that we did. I think I need to flip my screen so I can see. Okay, there we go.
There's no sound.
I think, yeah.
Okay. The sound, oh,
Question,
can you hear it
she
now?
said. Yeah, what?
Yeah. Do you want to rewind it, Susan, so that we can, yeah, thank you.
Or the possibilities of
I was spinning my friend. I grew up in Brooklyn. When I was in 5th grade, I was spinning my friends on the merry-go-round when Melanie Weiner skulked up to me. Can I ask you a question? She said. Yeah, what? Why would your mom marry a black man? What are you? My mom was a white Ashkenazic Jew. My dad, half black, half Chinese from the Caribbean. What are you? Was a constant question in my life. It still is. My parents met in the most conventional of ways, in college. It was rather ordinary for the time and place. It was 1960s at NYU. Who wasn't in an interracial relationship? But marriage was a whole different story. My mom had dated black men before, so bringing home my father was no big deal. My grandparents thought it was a phase, and eventually she would settle down with a nice Jewish boy. Instead, they eloped at City Hall. My dad did not even tell his own parents. My mom's younger sister was their witness and their only wedding guest. My mom was fierce. When my parents were ready to buy a house, only mom went to the open houses. The seller in our own all-white neighborhood had no idea she had black husband and black children. After we moved in, we got bomb threats. Bring it on, she said. Mom was fearless. In the midst of all this, we were members of a synagogue, attended Jewish day school. People were surprised, as if by marrying my dad, who was not Jewish, it made my mom less Jewish. It's the opposite. She actually grew up rather secular. She became more observant after getting married, and she was determined to raise Jewish children. In our house, we talked about Judaism a lot. But when it came to race, crickets. Parents never talked about race. The truth is that our family was segregated. We celebrated Thanksgiving and Christmas with the black relatives, Rosh Hashanah and Passover with the Jewish ones, and there the two shall meet. Only the Jewish relatives were invited to our bat mitzvahs, supposedly to save money. My parents thought that if they ignored the reality of racism, they wouldn't experience it. It was a wonderful utopian ideal. It meant that I didn't know how to discuss issues of race. I honestly didn't know what was in my head and what was real. For some reason, I thought the word church and the word Jesus were cuss words. God forbid I tell my Jewish friends that I celebrated Christmas with my grandparents. I had my first boyfriend. My cousin asked, "You black or white?" "I don't know," I said. I didn't. He was Indian. I really didn't know. I was frilly and extroverted on the outside. Inside, I was a mess. We just didn't talk about any of it. Back in 5th grade, senior Melanie Weiner asked me that loaded question. My mom died from an aneurysm. She was 40 years old. I was 10, and Tanya was 13. My dad kept our Jewish home going, still ignoring topics related to the color of our skin. I've since slowly opened up to him. We're still processing. To this day, as a 46-year-old mother, we're a member of my synagogue, and proud activist, the hairs on the back of my neck still tingle when I'm asked again and again, "What are you?" I wonder what my mom would say. Melanie Weiner friended me on Facebook a few years ago. I hadn't seen her since elementary school and kind of Facebook stalked her to figure her out from a distance. She seemed okay. Liked her. But asked if she remembered that moment on the playground, the one that was so deeply etched in my memory. She did not. She said she was horrified and embarrassed, but not surprised. We said things like that in our home all the time. That's how I grew up, she said. She said she's not raising her own daughters that way. She wanted me to know that she had broken that cycle. And I have too. My husband and I talk about race all the time with our girls. My 6-year-old is acutely aware that she looks different than her in your school class. It's hard to hear her wish for long hair that sways and peachy skin. It's hard, and we talk about it. I think I know what my mom would say.
Okay, sorry about that rough start. I didn't even think that my headphones didn't, and that's why you couldn't hear. So next, I'm going to hand it over. Whoops.
Two different types of voices, two different types of smiles.
Okay, sorry, the video restarted in my ear. So I'm going to hand it over for a couple of minutes to Joshua so he can share a bit of his background story.
Okay, I guess that's my time to talk. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this space on your computer screen or however you're watching it. Yeah, my name is Joshua Ruben Silverstein. I get asked often what my story is, and I find it such an interesting question because I have so many stories to tell. So I will keep it brief because we have there are two of us here today, and the other person speaking is way more fascinated than I am. So I am an LA native, born and raised. I'm about a good third generation Angelino. My grandparents on my father's side were activists in LA, and so I come from a very politically involved background. My mother is an educator. She took students from her high school to West Africa for 14 years. So both my parents were activists in their own ways in regards to making sure people were aware of their culture and their history. I am a performer by trade and an educator, like I said in my bio. And I fully believe that the only way that we can evolve as a people of multi ethnic backgrounds and experiences is to become more aware of the self and to accept the others that challenge our differences, and force us to look at who we are as people. So that's the story that I'm starting with today. There'll be more later.
Thank you. And I'm sure you all realize why we chose to show that powerful video. Newground does a storytelling event every year, and Versus was just one of the 6. I'm going to put the link into, at some point, I'll put the link into the chat. So if you want to see the other stories, you can. Earlier this year, the Jews of Color Initiative released a qualitative study to paint a portrait of the Jews of color experience in the US. The most common estimate of the percentage of American Jews that identify as Jews of color is 12%. One of the biggest takeaways of this study is that 80% of Jews of color have experienced discrimination in Jewish settings, and 66% have felt disconnected from their Jewish identities at time. Can I ask both of you to share a specific time you may have experienced a feeling of otherness in Jewish spaces?
Marissa, go ahead.
Wow, yeah. I would like to start off by saying that a vast majority of the time I feel very welcome in Jewish spaces, but I definitely felt othered, sometimes consciously and unconsciously by people. I definitely have had people come up to me and say, oh, are you visiting? Are you a guest? Do you know anything? You're basically implying that I know nothing about what it's like to be Jewish. When I was in college, I attended. I was in the University of North Carolina, so it's not it's in the South. It was not a lot of Jewish students, and they would match students with Jewish residents of the town for Passover Seders and things like that. And so I was matched for a Passover Seder with a professor. He was a Jewish professor, and both me and my sister were matched with him. And literally, he assumed we were not Jewish and just came to his Passover Seder just for the sake of coming to his Passover Seder. And was very polite, but he literally said, without asking us, he said, oh, since we have some non-Jewish guests, let's explain about Passover. And we were looking around like, who are the non-Jewish guests that don't know anything about Passover? But of course, he was talking about us. And it turned out my sister was the only Hebrew speaker at the table, and she ended up leading the Seder after we were done. So that has happened many times. The most really challenging event was when I was actually visiting a synagogue in Mexico City. I was there for work for about 6 weeks in Mexico, and I went to a synagogue. I even called ahead and asked if it was okay to come, and they said, of course, they welcome, guests. And they wouldn't let me in. They said I needed my passport. And I actually, the next week, went back with my passport, and the security guard would still not let me in. And it was the most humbling, humiliating, and really offensive experience I've ever had at a synagogue. He just kept questioning me, going from English to Spanish to Hebrew, and I would go with him in each language, and he still would not let me in. So
that's a common occurrence these days when we've had to raise the security at so many synagogues. We've heard stories like this.
I feel like we have a very warped sense of the word racism. And I think that has kind of added to my experience in regards to prejudice that I've experienced from being Jewish. I, unlike Marissa, have not had many welcoming experiences within Jewish spaces. And what I mean by that is generally when people meet me, they have the question that so many people ask, which is, well, how are you Jewish? And it's a very weird question to me because I experienced life as a Black man, and that no one ever questions that. No one says, well, how are you Black? And so my Jewishness is for me the same exact as my Blackness. I do not put it on in the morning. I don't take it off at night. I don't consider it as I walk down the street. It's an isness. It's just what it is. As a child, I did not understand what it meant to not be Jewish because I was so young and so accepting that of that fact that I just was Jewish. My grandparents were, my ancestors came out of Russia with so many other Jews to escape the viciousness of what life was like there. And that's in my DNA. That's in my trauma. That's what I carry. And so when people, I have been in countless spaces to this day where the way people seek to identify with me or to relate with me is to question my very existence. They don't ask me if I like shoes or my favorite movie or what type of gel I put in my hair, if I am nearsighted or farsighted. They ask about my Jewishness, and I think it's a very not necessarily racist, not just racist question to ask, but it's a very privileged question to ask too, to assume that I might not just be what I am.
Thank you. I know having mixed race kids the question they get is, what are you? And it took a long time for my kids to tackle that one. They're now 22 and 18. They have a much easier time. And my 22-year-old son says, I'm human, if he thinks somebody's being obnoxious in how they ask.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, not to keep talking longer than my time, but I also think that it speaks volumes to how we believe, what we think Jewishness means. So from when other Jews question my Jewishness, it feels like their experience is, well, to be Jewish must be a monolith. And we are forgetting about the infinite expressions that happen through Jewishness. So why can't I be part of that infinity? And so it's hard to figure out where that question comes from a lot of the time, but it definitely is a little alarming that I still get that question today.
Yeah.
I mean, the question comes from trying to put people into a box. I mean, that's what it is. And it's interesting, the piece that you heard was called, What Are You? I mean, that's what it is. It's, what are you? I was asked all the time as a kid, and my sister and I came up with great answers like, I'm human. We said that all the time. And what's interesting is when I was writing this piece, I actually at first put in that as a child, the sentence I wrote was, as a child, I was constantly asked this question. And then as I was workshopping it and working on the piece, this is a few weeks ago, someone asked me now in 2021 about it. So then I added, it still is a question. It still is. And I hadn't been asked in a while, but I just got that question again. And so it's still there. The way I frame it in my mind, I actually, instead of thinking, I've changed it for myself. When I was a child, I just wanted to blend in. I did not want to be different. I thought people thought I was strange. And I actually was a closet Jew. I hid it. I couldn't hide the color of my skin. I could hide being Jewish. And I just didn't want to be different. And now I think that most people are asking, not because they think that we're strange, and think because we're interesting. That's the way I like to frame it. They think we're interesting. I actually think, and in a little bit of a tokenism kind of way. I mean, I know that the way I'm a little bit popular because of the way I look. Like, people know who I am, and that's that's for better or worse. But that's when I walk into a Jewish space, there are a lot of people that know who I am that I don't remember who they are. Just is what it is.
Yeah, I will share an experience of my husband. Like I said, we've been at our synagogue for 18, 19 years. And when we had the Black church choir on Martin Luther King weekend, at least 2 or 3 people walked up to him. This was right before COVID, so it wasn't a long time ago, and said, "Oh, thank you so much for singing." And we've been there for 19 years, where our kids were bar and bat mitzvahed and confirmed, and he's there all the time with us as a family, and yet you still didn't know. So it's it takes a long time to change things, unfortunately. So something else that the report Beyond the Count reported was that 46% of Jews of color feel connection with other Jews of color as important for their well-being, yet less than 36% reported having friends that are Jews of color. I know I participated with my mixed race kids in in-person events in LA. That's where I met Marissa the first time. And there's online services with other Jews of color from across the country. What do these type of spaces mean to each of you?
I think they're comfort zones, right? There's comfort in the familiar. And I think when so much of the spaces that I've been invited to be in have let me know how interesting and peculiar I am, when that's not how I see myself. I mean, I see myself like that now because I like being special, but I definitely feel like there is a little bit of like, oh, that's not, when I get into those spaces where there are Jews of color, we don't talk about being Jewish. I got a friend named Eric Green, and that Marissa knows very well. That's a member of our community. And whenever Eric and I are together, we mostly talk about Prince because we both love Prince. And I mean, no one more than Eric, but like, that's what we talk about. Or, you know, we have a friend named Ingrid. And when I see Ingrid, we talk about karaoke or, you know, theater or like, you know, it just feels like in those spaces, I get to be a more broad example of my humanity. And when I'm in Jewish spaces where there are predominantly white Jews, my humanity is examined in a very narrow way. So that's for me what it means is to like, oh, I get to exist in the way that I exist at home. At home, I'm just dad. I'm just dad. I'm just crazy or cranky or whatever, however my kids see me, however my wife sees me. I'm not Jewish dad. I'm not, cranky Jewish man. I'm just this fuzzy, weird person in the house that says strange things for no reason to my children. And that's how I like to exist.
I said that, yeah, amen. That's really what it is. You're just yourself. You're not, you don't have a question mark over your head. You don't put question marks in other people's heads when you're in a room with people that kind of just get you.
Exactly why I've taken my kids to those spaces so that they can have that feeling. One of the things that Joshua kind of touched on that we can add is we talk about Judaism, and especially in the United States, as being very Ashken normative, which is the definition of the Eastern European white Jew. So there's a large misnomer that Black Jews in particular are probably something else. They don't seem to fit in. If you see a Latin or Spanish Jew, you could say, they're Sephardic. You see a Middle Eastern Jew, they're Mizrahi. But yet I believe both of you had a very, what we would call Ashken normative upbringing. And so your cultures that you were brought up with were probably very much like mine.
Oh yeah, my wife loves to talk about history and DNA, and one of the things that she's very proud of is that she is I think it's like a droplet sub-Saharan African. She's very proud of that. But I am 55% Ashkenazi Jew. It says it right there in the bold text. I am, if my humanity was to be divided into various cultural sections, I would mostly be Jewish, specifically Ashkenazi Jewish. So yeah, I had a very like traditional, by the book Ashkenazic, background growing up. But again, I just kind of normalized as this is what life is until I met other people of different experiences and backgrounds.
I'm the same way. My ancestry.com, same thing, 55% Ashkenazi, just like you. And my grandmother didn't speak English; she spoke Yiddish only until she went to school. And so yeah, I had a very traditional Ashkenazi upbringing as well. That being said, I would say I grew up on chicken noodle soup at one grandmother's house and curry goat at the other grandmother's house. And that literally was what happened.
Yeah. And, again, I'm not religious. So when I say traditional, I mean like all the little stereotypes you see in like Woody Allen movies. Yeah, that was my life. But also like Marissa, because I'm multi-ethnic and my mother is African-American, I got all that history as well. And my grandparents were atheists. So we did all these traditional Jewish experiences minus the conversation around God. So that was very interesting too, to go, oh, that's not what, you think of when you think about Jewish life, but I had so much of it. And yet, it was very individual in mine.
Yeah, and I think that's another misnomer about Judaism in general, is that there are atheists who identify as Jews, because as Judaism has, because of the way life has evolved, is a culture just as much as it is a faith. And I think another misnomer that I pulled out of the study was that 65%, a myth that most Jews of color are converted, but 65% of Black Jews or Jews of color were born Jewish and were raised Jewish.
Right.
This came up in the Q&A, but it's a question that I already had for you both. Is the study also highlights that the majority of Jews of color feel more comfortable navigating non-Jewish BIPOC, meaning Black, Indigenous, people of color spaces than predominantly white Jewish spaces. How do you find yourself having to navigate, if you do, your Judaism in the Black community? Start with Marissa, I think.
Well, like I said, I think that I was very closeted when I was younger because I could hide being Jewish. I couldn't hide the color of my skin. So that was how I navigated, which is really sad because I really enjoy and feel the part of me that is Jewish, and thankfully I'm not that way anymore. I'm really open. I think that that being said, how do I navigate it? I always announce my Judaism. And I know that if I were white or more stereotypically Ashkenazic looking Jewish, I wouldn't have to do that. So an example, I was in the store looking for to buy matzo ball soup mix. And I was like looking in the aisles and I like felt the need when I was like looking for it. I went to the person who works in the store. I'm like, I'm Jewish. Are there any, do you know where the Jewish food section is? Like I had to say I'm Jewish. I don't know why, but I felt like I had to announce it. I couldn't just say, oh, where's the matzo ball soup mix? It's such a small thing, but I felt like it was, and I do that. I find that myself do that a lot. And again, I'm very comfortable in my skin now, but clearly I still have that little thing saying, oh, you're about to announce something or say something that's going to make this person question who you are. And you don't feel comfortable when you do that. You have to, do something to, sidestep that situation. And so that's how I deal with it. I announce it very often.
That's awesome. I'm very proud to be all that I am. I'm very proud to be Jewish. With that being said, as a biracial man, I understand and accept that I have access that other, Black people do not have. I have a white father, so I know. So I get to be in the room with whiteness differently than a lot of Black people get to be in the room and experience. And so I'm aware of that. I'm also very aware of colorism within my community as a Black man, meaning that because of my lighter skin complexion, that gives me a certain privilege that darker skinned people, whether they be Black or brown, don't get to experience. My wife is the same way. She's a lighter skinned Mexican woman, and she gets a different kind of privilege as well. And so I'm aware of all those things. And so within the community that I'm a part of, referring to the Black community, that does come up, those conversations about, who has it harder, right? There's like the whole thing of like, whose trauma is worse, that fun competition. So I definitely have those conversations. And interestingly enough, because I am Jewish, that's another access point that other, so there's not just the whiteness that I have access to, but there's also the Jewishness that I have access to. So you have this whole other culture on the other side of the fence, lack of a better word, that I have insight into. So I kind of enjoy those conversations. I like that I get to be kind of a bridge in conversations about race and culture that a lot of people don't get to have. So I enjoy those opportunities to go, well, listen, this is my Jewish experience. For those of you who have this unfortunate stereotype still looming in your in your mind when you think about what Jews are, you know. And so I like that I get to kind of be that, like, hey, well, that's not what it really is, or yeah, that's true actually, you know. So whatever conversation comes my way that gives me the opportunity to talk about my Jewishness or my access to whiteness within Black spaces, I'm very eager to. And for the most part, I haven't experienced any kind of like negative experience because of that. They've been really kind of beautiful and eye-opening.
That's good to hear. So I'm gonna, just like I turned it on our two Black Muslim friends, I'm gonna turn it a little bit more serious with the last question I have, and then we'll open it up if anybody in the audience has any questions. Along with the racial reckoning going on, the visibility of Palestinian rights has increased, often conflating harmful Israeli government policies with Jewishness and anti-Semitism. Has that changed your experience in the Black community for either one of you?
I can go. You know, I think in some ways, like Joshua said, because of the color of my skin, I am able to navigate both worlds a little bit differently than someone who's darker. And so I do get a lot of questions about it. I get a lot of questions, and you know, I'm a very open, openly critical of Israel's government's policies. So in some ways, I don't have the, you know, I'm not right wing and have as much conflict with some of those issues. But I think I get asked a lot about it, and I don't know if that's more than people that are not Jews of color, just Jews, white Jews. I'm not sure if they're getting asked as much, but I do get asked a lot about it. And just my own personal politics, I'm more aligned with the issues that many people that are critical of Israel's government are. So I guess I don't have that issue.
You know, has it changed? You know, I think because of what happened, because of the pandemic, because of what happened last year, wow, it's crazy to say that, with Floyd and police brutality and people, you know, like it was the biggest world protests we've ever really experienced in our lifetime, if ever. I think people's traumas are really being looked at in a different way. I mean, look, if you're an American, you should be in therapy, right? Like that's obvious. If you're a man, there's no way you could experience American life and not come out with warped ideas about women. Like there's just certain things. If you are a white person, there's no way you could experience being American and not in some way benefit from racism. So there's all these facets of what it means to be here and right now that we're looking at in different ways. And one of the things I've been really, you know, interested in is, and kind of witnessing is everyone is hurting somehow, right? You know, you look at Black people as a group and we've got a lot of trauma because of this nation's history. You look at brown people in this country who have got a lot of trauma. You got indigenous people in this country. We are now, for the first time, starting to say things like, I am on XYZ's land, right? We're starting to just now in 2021 recognize the genocide of people who have been here longer than anyone. And so, you know, we are all hurting. And I don't know that the conversation has come up for me. I mean, I've talked about it in my own, you know, with my family, but I haven't really heard people talk about problems that are going on in other country here, because I think for right now, everyone's kind of focused on their own social group's pain and their own. I mean, this is a whole nother topic, but I just watched the stand-up special, and this comedian could not realize that what he was doing was making another group's trauma more real by joking about it. You know, in his head, his trauma was so much more important that he couldn't recognize, like, hey, I'm just, belittling someone else's pain by making light of it. So I think that I don't hear the Palestinian Israeli conflict conversation come up too much within my own groups of people, because I think most of those people that conversation would not be normally happening, those people are like, hey, people in my community are dying. It's not safe to go outside. There's still gun violence. I'm still a target. Like, that's still happening, very real right now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I asked that question is like Marissa, I am on the progressive side and also very involved in politics. And that is an issue. No matter how critical I may be of the Israeli government, I am immediately thought to have a certain opinion about things just because I'm Jewish. And so I kind of wondered about that. But Amelia, you had the next question.
I did. Thank you so much, both Marissa and Joshua, for sharing your experiences with us. Last week we had this conversation with being Black and Muslim, and I remember one of the specific instances when I started with the SCIC. The whole premises of our organization is to build relationships and to build community with one another, diverse community. And one of the things before the pandemic that I would always be doing is going to churches and synagogues and temples and everywhere all the time. And I specifically remember when I entered an African American church, and this happened more than once. There was a little bit of something there, and so one of the individuals that I had the pleasure of befriending, and we've become really good friends. It was into my second year that we were having coffee together, and he goes, let me just be honest with you. He's like, here's the thing, Milia. The reason that we're hesitant to engage with you or to engage with what you're doing is because you kind of took our people. And what he was referring to is obviously the Nation of Islam, right? I mean, if you study the history of religion, that's a whole different topic in itself, but obviously, within the Islamic paradigm, the Nation of Islam, it was African American Muslims, right? And that came to Orthodox Islam and things like that. But it took, it was Muslims who were African American, right? Muslims who were no longer necessarily, the very Christian based. So I guess I just wonder, in terms of when you engage the African American community, when you engage with the Black community, is there that tension? Does something similar to that exist, where they feel like, well, why are you there? This is who we are. I just wonder if that's something that you guys have encountered, or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what a great question. It's really deep, because just like I believe my Jewishness is infinite, I so believe my Blackness is too. And to be Black, there are subgroups of Blackness. There are Black conservatives, as crazy as that may sound, and there are Black liberals, and there are Black moderates, and I'm a liberal, and there's a Black man named Jesse Lee Peterson, I think. And I was on his show, and he's a Black conservative, and this man's got to be I don't know, maybe 60s, 70s. And he's a Black man born in America. His grandmother raised him on a plantation in the South. She was owned by white people. And this older Black man that I spoke to on his show, he invited me because I'm a liberal. He wanted to have that conflict. He believes that Black people were better off as slaves, and that Black people had it better when we were white people. And to be on his show was jarring, but it's a good example of they're really, as bass backwards as I think he is entitled to his own his own beliefs, his own experiences, and whatever his life was has led him to who he is now. And clearly his life experiences were very different than mine, because I can't imagine what has got him there, but he's there. And so it just tells you that we are made up of a people that have so many experiences and so many beliefs. I mean, there are people that are living across the country from me who are African American, and if you got us in the same room, I would know what they're talking about, right? I mean, our music is wildly vast, our art is vast. I mean, and so you know, our culture is thriving the same way any culture is thriving. So I haven't, as a Jewish man, been in a Black space recently and felt this, why are you here? But I will tell you, I've been in places that were a lot cooler than I was, and felt like, oh, I'm not hip enough to be in this room. Like I'm a nerdy guy, and I'm in a room that's like way cooler than I am. Like I felt that, or I've been, you know, a liberal in a conservative space and felt like this, like uneasiness and, you know, scariness. And I've definitely been a male in a place where I was clearly not in the right place at the right time, and I was occupying too much space as a man. And I have felt those experiences, but you know, but I don't know that I've ever equated it to my Blackness is so different than your Blackness, or my Jewishness is so different than your Blackness that I don't belong in this room. I don't think I've ever had that experience. But I do want to say something that I think is interesting too, is that, you know, the history of cultures and religions are so vast and so interesting, and I don't know that we're having enough of those conversations. And I think because we are not having those conversations, there's not the right kind of healing going on, because religion and cultures are evolving and changing, and of course they are. So the religion that exists now may not be the same that existed, you know, 100 years ago or whatever. And we are not having the discussion needed to accept that and heal and move forward. So I feel like when we can get to those conversations, maybe more healing can take place, and maybe those awkward feelings won't exist as much anymore.
And that's a lot of what the work that SCIC attempts to do. Right. And I think, you know, when you refer to that man who was brought up on a plantation, there's history there that shows that some of the people that were enslaved were indeed probably Muslim and Jewish, because there were African Muslims and African Jews at that time, but Christianity became their way of surviving and their way of coping with things. But we don't hear about that history, much like we don't hear about a lot of other Black history, but that's, you know, that's another piece of that. We just have a couple more minutes left. I'd like to know if anybody else has a question. You can either unmute yourself, or at the bottom where it says reactions, you can do the little icon to raise your hand, and I'll be happy to acknowledge you.
I just wanted to mention one thing about what Amelia asked. I don't feel that in Black spaces, my Judaism is fully questioned. It's more because I am mixed race, because I'm multiracial, because it's explained that my mom was white Jewish, like that. There's an explanation that's a very simple explanation. So I'm not questioned that often of, you know, how come you're Jewish when I'm in a Black space. Where I do feel that my existence is questioned is being multiracial. That I feel like I have to explain that to people, or people have to, or just, you know, going back to the original, what are you question, just the general of how did this come about? Where are you from? What's going on here? What's going on? And also how did you, you know, with your mom marrying a Black man, how did they even stay Jewish? I mean, those questions are, that's a thing. That's definitely a thing. And so I have to explain, because if you just see me and it raises questions in people's minds. I think that is a thing of what are you in the first place? And then that might bring in other questions. But once they hear the explanation, oh, okay, I get it now. But just my physical appearance does raise a lot of questions.
Anybody else have any other questions?
Oh my God, Susan, I have a litany of questions, but I'm just going to keep it low.
Well, you can ask one more. We've got time for another question since nobody else is volunteering.
No, are you sure?
And, yeah, ask one more question.
Yeah, well, it kind of show in line of what's great minds do think alike, Sarah, in lines of what Sarah had wrote in terms of like how the importance of cultivating these communities that express curiosity, right, versus express we're all in the study of anthropology, right? We study this concept that we all want to try to figure each other out, right? That's human for us to do that. And so there's this stereotypes that we end up relying on. But the question is that whether that stereotype is something that's hurtful to that individual, or is it something that's allowing us to better understand this person and all the history that comes with this person. So I guess for me, I wonder in terms of the quest to cultivate communities of compassion, or cultivate communities where we understand one another. Joshua, you talked about the importance of learning about each other, which is so true. But again, for me, and I guess, I know that you two don't speak for all the bubble guppies needs to be put on as well, but I know that you don't speak for like, all the African-American Jews in the world. But I guess I just wonder.
Oh, I do. I wasn't clear. I
What
definitely
was I
do.
thinking? Of course. One second, Mama. But I guess I was just wondering, in order for us to do that, we have to trust one another, right? We have to. So how do we do that? Because the thing is that I think I love the work I do, and I always smile. I'm a positive person, but I tell you what, when it comes with religious communities, there's also a lot of mistrust between one another, right? Because with African, again, I can only speak with the Muslim community. I know about the others by studying it, but I think sometimes we feel like people have taken people away from our community. I suspect there's African American communities that are like, man, why are you Jewish? Like, to know your own people, know your own history when they don't know the history of Judaism, right? So how do we build that trust, though, if we're not? I guess that's something that something that I always wonder with. And I'm going to put on bubble guppies before you hear a whole orchestra of music. So please, if you can address that would be fantastic.
It's a great question, and it's one that Cynthia, who's my wife, and I talk about a lot, right? Because there's, on one hand, we need to have dialogue about our experiences in order to move forward, right? Like I always talk about evolution because we often take historical cues as landmarks in our own evolution. Like we look at Albert Einstein, we go, look what he did, look at how far we've come. And I always go, he did that, not us. He evolved. We didn't do anything. Like we stayed put while people in history have done great things. Dr. King was amazing and was an involved thinker, but he was that, and there was the expectation for us to kind of meet him, and so many people did not. So we are not as far along as I think we are, and so a lot of these conversations are really hard because our thinking hasn't even gotten there yet, right? So I think the starting place is to go from, what is my human, right? Like, what kind of human am I? Am I a human who's hurting? Am I a human who's thinking for themselves? And really have those tough conversations. And I almost feel like we have to start talking about the personal stuff first and get to a place where those questions are being answered in a safe space, right? Like, I am the Black man who has to answer the questions of like, why can't I touch your hair? Right? Because it's to someone asking like, well, what's just hair? But to me, I'm like, I have a history of that not being okay. So I've put myself in the place to be someone that answers those questions. And and as awkward as they may be, because I know that someone has to answer that question. But we need to do a lot of work on where those questions come from. You know, why is this person asking me, what am I? Is it because my existence is confusing to them? And if my existence is confusing, why is it confusing to them? And we need to have that conversation. And so I feel like in a lot of ways, while I am very much interested in being in spaces and cultivating spaces where we have cultural dialogue, where we can swap cultural stories and feel seen and feel heard, we also need to create spaces where we're talking about the personal and the I, and we need to make sure that those stories are being heard as well, because people's cultures and people's faiths are personal. And so for a stranger to go, well, what are you? We don't know what that means to that person. And that's a very big question to not only think about, but to answer. You know, and I don't even know that we even consider the language we're using to ask these questions. Like, what are you versus what is your ethnic background are two different questions. And I'm more inclined to answer one with less skepticism than the other, right? So I really feel like, while I 100% am with you on, like, we got to talk about this stuff, I also hope that we're making sure the other parts of our lives are equally important, and those backstories to our humanity need to be talked about.
Melissa, Marissa, I'll ask if you have any last words, and then I'm going to hand it over to Amelia because I want to be mindful of time. Either Amelia or Sarah is going to share our upcoming program. So, Marissa?
No, I was just saying that amen again to everything Joshua said, and just also realize that our stories are personal, that I don't speak for other Black Jews. Joshua doesn't speak for other Black Jews. We all have our own stories. We all have our own experiences, and it's difficult and kind of unfair to expect us to be like, oh, so this is, I mean, for any group, any one person to speak to an entire group, or to be, so just want to throw that out there too. And thank you for having us today.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much to both of you. You know, we have these, and we named this Courageous Conversations because we do want to have these conversations. There's not wanting to air one's dirty laundry from their culture. There's, you know, being worried that somebody might question your faith if you share it. And so these programs that we do are exactly for that reason. I'm looking at the faces on here. I'm like a half a generation older than half and a half a generation younger than the other half. And I was raised that we don't talk about religion, politics, or money. And that's why our world is so screwed up right now.
Isn't that, you know, I talk so much. Isn't that so funny though? Because those are the three things that are the most oppressive parts of our society. Like, isn't it odd that we won't talk about those things when they oppress everybody? Like, if anything, we can relate to those three things. But I think it's because we're scared of the personal. I think, you know, as long as you're interested in the individual, then you'll have a conversation.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. But I, as well as the rest of the board from the South Coast Interfaith Council and I'm sure our audience on here are so grateful and thankful that you have taken an hour out of both of your busy days to be authentic, to share, to be courageous, and have this conversation with us. And so I am going to hand it over, I think, to Sarah to share with us the upcoming programs.
It's Melia.
Sarah, if you should, sorry, in my mind, I'm still thinking, because these are, you know, you're absolutely right. And I hope Marissa and Joshua and really all the people that we have on these courageous conversations, that we can expand on these, because it's the disservice to have an hour, you know, and talk about these, but it's so important to at least bring up the topic. I think that's very important. And absolutely the point about connecting on a personal level, that's so important because it humanizes us, right? It shows us that we can, we can connect heart to heart. And once we do that, then we see that, for SAIC, we always say this thing that we're much more alike than we are different. It's not to negate our differences, right? It's to honor those differences and celebrate it, and then unite on what unites us as a humanity. I have so many program ideas in my head right now. So both Marissa and Joshua, expect emails from me within the next 2 weeks or so. This is fantastic. So thank you so much.
And beware of those Melia emails, because she's really, really good at roping you in.
I know how it is.
You'll get a lot of new email who dis replies from me.
But yes, thank you both so much. We're so grateful and so appreciative of your time that you spent with us and the stories that you shared. I do want to just spend a few minutes or a minute just to talk about some of our upcoming programs. To all of you who are joining us, thank you so much for joining us today and for always joining us on these programs. And we hope that you'll continue to join us in our upcoming events, such as the Crop Walk is something that we've done for years. I think this is maybe our 40th annual one. So we have one that's coming up in October 24th, and this is actually a walk. Last year we did kind of a drive where we were in the cars, but again, the profits go towards feeding those who don't have feeding those who don't have food, who have less access to food, both in this country and worldwide. Our Religion 101 flyer, I think the graphics didn't come on here, but that's all right. Every month we have a Religion 101 series, the fourth Thursday of the month. And this Thursday, October 28th, we'll have Reverend David Brown talking from the Wayfarers Church. So talking about the Swedenborg Church. So we hope that you'll join us for that. And that will be on Zoom as well. And I think there's yes. So our next Courageous Conversation will actually be on November the 5th. And what we're going to be talking about is recognizing the Native American perspectives, Thanksgiving and the National Day of Mourning. What is that? What does it mean? How can we connect with one another? What can we learn from each other, right? And talk about something that's often not talked about insofar as the Native American perspective when it comes to this, some people call it holiday, some people don't. But when it comes to this important event that as in America, we tend to all partake in. So that's on November 5th at 3 p.m. And of course, the most important thing, yes, we actually have another event in November as well. And sorry, I don't think you have that, but the Armistice Day, which is November. Sorry, maybe you can speak a little bit about that after this slide. But as all nonprofits, of course, we are based on donations. And so if you are able to and inclined to do so, we would be grateful for any donations that would continue to support programs like this. You could go on our website, scinterfaith.org/donate. You could text help SCIC to 44321, or send your donation via mail to our address 525 East 7th Street in Long Beach. All of this is available on our website as well. I don't know, Sarah, if you want to say really quickly about, I know you're kind of on the committee on the program on November, and then we will conclude. Are you there? Okay, great.
Oh, my camera's turned up. Yes. Okay. Hello, everyone. And Joshua and Marissa, that was, I enjoyed it so much. And Susan, that was just the most beautiful facilitation. Thank you. Really well done. Yes, so I only learned this last year, which is kind of sad. And I grew up in our public schools, so that says a lot. But I did not know that Veterans Day started out as Armistice Day, and that Armistice Day was later co-opted and became what we know as Veterans Day. So we are taking back Armistice Day as Armistice Day. So we will be honoring the day on November 11th, Thursday, November 11th, near the Lone Sailor statue in Long Beach. Our office is in Long Beach. That's our home community for the South Coast Interfaith Council. It is tradition to ring a bell 11 times at the 11th hour. So our program is around 11 a.m. At the Lone Sailor statue in Long Beach. And I think the flyer will be posted very shortly. The committee is actively working on putting together, there'll be veterans from recent wars speaking. There'll be individuals who have been impacted by war and militarism. And so we are going to be calling the world really to embrace peacemaking as not just the absence of war, but actually an earnest and real effort that we engage in every day. So yes, we'd love to see friends join us and participate. We'll be outdoors. People will be wearing masks and, keeping our social distances.
Yeah. And then I think other than that, just a note of gratitude. Susan, thank you. Thank you for moderating this and moderating our last session. And little does she know the sessions to come most likely, but we'll talk about that later.
So yeah, I talked about her roping people in.
Such a negative connotation. But Joshua and Marissa, again, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who've joined us today. And we hope that you'll join us next month as well, and as well with all of our other programs. So thank you, and have a blessed, blessed rest of the day and weekend. And we will see you next month, if not sooner. So take care. Thank you all.
Judy, I saw your hand was up. Did you want to say hello really? Oh, you're muted now.
Is Judy still
Oh,
there?
Judy, you're muted.
She's talking so much though. It's beautiful. I love whatever she's saying. It sounds amazing.
Judy,
Like, yes, Judy,
You're
yes.
muted.
I was not putting my hand up. I'm sorry. This was a wonderful picture of stories. I loved hearing your stories, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Judy's always with us, and we're so grateful. Judy, is your hand okay? Is that a brace? Are you?
I had wrist surgery recently.
Oh my.
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
You're okay?
Yay.
Okay, good. Oh, good. That's good to know. Okay, good.
Judy,
Don, thank you for being here. Don is here from the Orange County Interfaith community, and he's been part of our SCIC family recently a lot. So we're grateful to see you again as well, Don.
Thank you. I'm fascinated by the great things you're doing.
Thank you. Don.
It could be spread further within Orange County.
Yeah.
Spread the good you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you
Don.
so much.
Yay.
Sarah, I'm really grateful for your comment in the chat, because it kind of speaks to what Marissa was talking about, that we have gotten into this habit when we look at each other to categorize each other, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And when I was little, people thought I was Japanese, and I'm not kidding. And it's like, hey, you're a Jap. No, I'm not. But it was interesting. My mom, when she took me to the pediatrician, Dr. Barry, who was diagnosing all my learning disabilities, neuro stuff, automatically made the assumption that my dad was Asian, which he wasn't. So it was, and this was 6 years old, people. And I'm going to be 62 in December. So it's been happening a good long time, but we've got to stop it.
And there's something we can all do here, right? By embracing curiosity ourselves and modeling curiosity. Hi, Monik.
Hey,
How are you?
Monik.
We have Monik from the Zoroastrian community here, who is a past member of our board of directors, and is frequently joins us for our programs as well. So it's always nice to have you here, Monik.
Anyway, have a blessed night. Shabbat shalom to
Shabbat
everybody.
shalom.
Everybody,
Thank you.
and happy Juma Day. I know, because I'm in the Democratic headquarters in Santa Maria, and upstairs in Suite 8 is the Islamic Center, and the men came for their prayers this afternoon. They are really faithful people.
One thing funny happened a week ago or so. I used to take a walk in my community, senior community, and I saw this a star, with a little light bulbs in the window of one of the houses that I was passing by. So and it was like Yom Kippur. So I kind of knocked on the door, although it was kind of dark, late evening. And when the lady opened, I said, happy Yom Kippur, But she says, but this is the 5-pointed star, but I think Jewish star is 6-pointed or something. And this star is only for basically American star for Christmas time. So I was surprised to, knock at the wrong door. But no, that was a good icebreaker. But we started having a general conversation, and that turned out to be good anyway.
Thanks for sharing, Monik. Joshua, so how do we get to hear you beatbox? You have a website.
Man, how much time and money you got?
The first one we got. The second one we're working on, Joshua. We're working on it.
You work on that and you get back to me.
Good. Sounds good. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so please don't feel like you have to be on. But just if you'd like to, we're more than welcome to. But otherwise, thank you again so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again in our other programs.
All right, bye guys.
All right, guys, take care.
I look
Bye, Marissa. Thank you.
I look forward to next month. That's gonna be a good one.
Oh, thank you. Yes, we hope that it will be a meaningful conversation
too, especially since we have Indigenous Peoples Day coming up.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. Yeah.
It's the two hardest holiday events on our calendar that are not friendly.
Right.
The thing about complicated feelings. Amelia, if I press end now, it's after that the pop-up message is going to come up, right? I just haven't pressed end because I'm afraid of messing something up. I think I pressed end and then the pop-up comes up. I'm pretty sure.
I think so. I think that's what Cheryl said in her notes. Yeah.
Or I can click stop on the recording now too, right?
Yes.
Let's see what it does.
Yes.